You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
The world has changed since 9/11, but not so much for other people, but definitely for Rick Dellaratta. He is the founder of Jazz for Peace. Quite an incredible journey and story to share with us today, and we're so excited to have him on. Rick, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hey, very good. Great to be with you.
Yeah, so excited to have you on. So kind of take me back through your entrepreneurial journey, what you were doing before and the past 20 years that you've been dedicating your life to.
Well, being a musician is a little bit entrepreneurial to begin with, because even if you see a bunch of kids in a garage and they're developing something that's unique and new and they're on a journey that is somewhat entrepreneurial in certain aspects. So I did have a background of that kind of thing, inventing things, creating things. All of those things are part of entrepreneurism. People started calling me an entrepreneur, let's say, after 9/11, because I did change my trajectory to fit the times and to fit my experience of the times. I just happened to see 9/11 from a bird's eye view of the roof of a building on the Lower East Side, not knowing at the time that I was one of so few people that was witnessing that event live and from such a close distance. Of course, I didn't really know anything at the time. It was hard to even believe what I was seeing anyway. But from that experience, I did have something to show for it at the end of the day, which was a poem. So I looked at the words of the poem, and I don't know how these words came out of me or where they came, but they somehow came through me. They came onto this paper. I'm not necessarily a poet, but I have a poem, and I think I'm going to call it Jazz for Peace based on the words of the poem. So it just went from one step to another. What are you going to do with this poem? I have no idea. But then something will reveal itself. And I think entrepreneurs are good at that kind of stuff. They're good at allowing the game to come to them. They're good at allowing things to reveal themselves. And so I started to have to trust that, because I had no idea. I have a poem. I had no idea it was a C9/11, and I had no idea what I was going to do with the poem. But then all of a sudden, the country reopens, and I'm at a big jazz festival. I'm the headliner. There's 8,500 people there. So I have an idea. I think I'll read the poem. So I read it. So, well, what am I going to do now? Because everyone's talking about it now, and it's working its way north. I joked around with a couple of people telling them that when the Civil War, Sherman went south. You know what I mean? But my poem went north, and it went from Savannah, Georgia, back to New York, where I had an event coming up. And again, that poem was gathering steam and people wanted to know about it. And the press wanted to hear me recite it for them so they could print it in an article. It came out in an article along with a famous quote, something I just made up off the top of my head, which now is on all those famous quotes websites. And that's just a simple quote, which was just, if we fill our souls up with creativity, artistry, humanity, all of our greatest qualities as human beings, if we put all those greatest qualities, embrace them, fill up our souls with it, we will have a better chance at avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. I said it off the top of my head, but it's all over the place now on those famous quotes websites. So these things would just happen. And then what am I going to do now that I read the poem? Well, those people promoting that show were like, are you going to put that to music for our show? So it started to get like that. Then it was the reviews of the actual concert reviews. Dellaratta starts out a show with Jazz for Peace. So it's been a lot of that. So that brings us to the entrepreneur. And again, it's kind of like believing and trusting that the next step will reveal itself.
That is an incredible journey, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And it is so true that being in a band is just like owning a business or being an entrepreneur. You're trying to get these schedules and ideas together to think big picture onto something, create something that can bring value to the masses. And oftentimes, if maybe it's a 5-piece band, you have 1 or 2 members who are a bit more ambitious, kind of keeping the team together. You get your weak links, but it all comes together. You make this project happen and you kind of see where it goes. And to see where your journey has led you has just been incredible. Playing in front of tens of thousands of people, these live audiences, reaching the globe, having this name out there, and then using that sort of impact to make positive change, I think is really powerful, just in the way that you kind of describe how your journey found itself along its way. Not many entrepreneurs can say that happens quickly enough for them, but it's all kind of a journey we're kind of figuring out along the way. What is Jazz for Peace, and what is its purpose, and how does it help people?
Well, I was like, what am I going to do now? And then I thought, well, now that this press has come out about Jazz for Peace, maybe I'll play a few Jazz for Peace concerts around New York City. And then as I was doing that, I thought Jazz for Peace could probably help some outstanding causes. Wouldn't that be interesting? And I talked to someone who was in the nonprofit space, and this woman was like, hey, they really need money and they need this and they need that. You could really make a difference for outstanding causes. So we started doing that. I figured there must be a handful or more in New York City. Maybe there's 20 or 30. I had no idea there were 60,000 registered nonprofit organizations just in New York City alone, and millions around the world. And who knew? Nobody ever told anybody. No one told me. So with so many of them in New York City, we were able to just find one and bumble our way into another. This guy has enough. These people have a food garden out in Queens. Why don't you come out and get them going? That was cool, I guess. I hope it was. And then I would get back, but I would get a letter from the person that we performed for. And I would get these emails, which you often don't get when you play in a club or something. You get your money, you go home. But these people would write me letters and they would say stuff. So I was getting these things like, we really got a lot of publicity from that. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Well, a cultural event, a world-class cultural event, which Jazz for Peace at that time could offer. I mean, you're in New York City. There's a lot of great musicians in New York City, and I knew them. I was paying my dues around this town, so I knew people to call. I had them coming out of my ears. I had talent. So I'm bringing these incredible musicians together and playing. So even the very first Jazz for Peace concert in upstate New York had some of the world's greatest musicians. But had myself, a great bassist in all of jazz history, Eddie Gomez, one of the great drummers in all of jazz history, Lenny White, one of the great saxophone players of the Cuban-born Paquito de Rivera. So anyway, New York City, they're overflow. They're all over the place. These people had to travel, but now these people just walk down the street in New York City. So I'm getting letter after letter, and the one guy's telling me the publicity. I'm like, well, he's right. A world-class cultural event can bring an organization a lot of publicity, whereas your average fundraiser might not. But this one can. You can approach a lot of different people, and Jazz for Peace can even approach a lot of different people with publicity. So you're getting funds, but you're also getting publicity and awareness. That's a big thing. They want to get their message out. Another one would write me and say, man, we're a lot more prestigious now than we were after your event, because so-and-so came down, and someone like a senator came to, he loves jazz and came to this, or this guy or that guy, or a celebrity or whatever. And I'm like, wow, well, that's true. Something like this could attract prestigious people. And we did start attracting very prestigious people. I told a story the other day about how a guy, we got a call, so who's running for president. It was actually a guy named Dennis Kucinich. He's going to be at your event. We're his office in Washington, D.C. And he wants to, I'm like, does he realize it's in a youth hospital? You know what I mean? I didn't tell him that in the basement of youth hospital. I'm not going to tell him. He's going to come. And the organization was like, oh my God, one of the presidential candidates came to our. So again, it was publicity and awareness. Okay, great. But other ones would say our donor base was falling off the bone here, like a chicken falling, like chicken meat. You revived them. They're so excited after this event. They feel rejuvenated. So now I'm collecting these things. Okay. We can do this. We can do that. These are all things in addition to funds. And they're really important. Sometimes they're even more important than funds. How other people is that you expanded our donor base. This expanded our. So now I'm putting all these together and I'm realizing this is an empowerment tree that we have in a chance to impact people. So we might strike out in one area. We might hit a home run in another area. And this branch might look a little bit deformed, this tree, the little branch here and a large branch here. But so look outside every tree. They're all different. They all look crazy. There's trees that grow out of rocks and like these near rivers. They grow in these squiggly ways, but they're beautiful. So I'm like, we'll grow a unique and beautiful empowerment tree for every organization. I don't know what it'll look like, but we'll follow these steps and grow these branches. So now we had something called an empowerment tree, and that started to get us world famous. That plus an idea I had for my manager to call over to the United Nations every now and then and just see if, they had any results on this idea of mine to bring a multicultural band into the United Nations and show how we all get along through the great American art form of jazz. Finally, after a year of her dialing every now and then, I said, just do it in your spare time. She thought I was crazy. I said, look, they'll probably direct you here, direct you there, but just listen, come on, go for it. Well, then finally she says, this is happening. They want you to do this. Someone looked over this and showed that. And I said, great, I need you to do one thing. I said, put a band together. which is going to be no problem in New York City, but make sure you have one Israeli and one Palestinian. And she said, what, really? Are you sure? I said, listen, just trust me on this, because I played with Israeli Palestinians too in music in New York. And yeah, there's no war going on that I knew based on my knowledge of playing with both people in the same room on the same stage. I don't care where the other guy could be. The other guys could all be from Punta Gorda, Florida. You got to have this. And I don't, wherever the other guys, whoever else you get is great. So we did. We had an Israeli and a Palestinian. And then we had some other people rounding it out. That's important. I don't care if anybody else thinks it's important or not. I think that's significant. And sure enough, like 20 or so years later, all of a sudden we get to that 20-year point where it takes the public to catch up to the artist. And then unless you're Vincent van Gogh, then it might take hundreds of years. But I start these podcasts like, hey, did you really do that at the United? I said, yeah. And I've been trying to tell you guys but now you guys got it. So now they're caught up to where we are now. But what I'm hoping is our ideas now don't take 23 years for people to catch up, because that idea back then could have done a lot of good. And who knows if some of my ideas now could do a lot of good. I happen to think maybe they could.
I love that. That is so cool to hear about that story and the transition and how that brought you to where you are. That is just incredible. One of the things that I loved hearing about is that people felt moved and compelled enough to write you these thank you letters and thank you emails to show gratitude and support, to say you really changed our nonprofit for the better. And this was helping them solve a problem that you didn't go there with the intent to solve this problem, but it was a side effect, a byproduct of you going in, and now they're getting increased visibility. There's more prestige to it, which just means increased donor dollars. They can help more people then. With all the nonprofits and business owners, for me, I see a lot of business owners start nonprofits. And I was just curious, with all the nonprofits and business owners that you've kind of come into, are there common threads between all these nonprofits that kind of make them, these are all the qualities that they share together?
Absolutely. This page that we have, it's called jazzforpeace.com/about. It's not even our main website because we have so much archive material. So it's a WordPress page, jazzforpeace.wordpress.com. And then you put a /about. If you go to that page, you actually see the letters that they wrote. We just have them there. You'll never read all of them because there are hundreds and hundreds of letters from all these different people. And of course, that's where we got all the ideas from them telling us, hey, we benefited in this way. Wow, let's pass that forward to the next one. And let's make sure all of them benefit. Let's make sure all of them are more befriended, more sponsored businesses, right? I mean, one time we had a local business sponsor ended up in the Village Voice, got an award for sponsoring a Jazz for Peace event. So now, as you're talking businesses are smart to come on board and sponsor a Jazz for Peace event. They're helping the outstanding cause, but man, it's good for them. It's good for their business.
And I think something that your story highlights as well is the power of ask. When I worked in a nonprofit and just what nonprofits need to do, there's a power within just asking someone, hey, can we have your support? Can we have your donation? Can you volunteer some time? Until you ask, you won't know if that's a yes or a no and what possibilities can come from that. So to hear that you put this initiative, call the UN, put this up the ladder, see who can take us. And finally, after asking, you got a response and it was positive. And you did what you did. That's just incredible to hear. So much power behind asking. And you've kind of put this into effect over the last 20 years.
Chris, I'm telling you, if I can do it, anybody can. That's the secret. I mean, everybody needs to really know that they themselves can really make a difference. They are all unique. They are all special. I've never met a person that couldn't do something that I could never do in a million years. And I'm sure that includes you. If I got to know you, I'd be like, this guy, I can't believe he can do that. I could never do that. Only he can do that. That's just the way. And if everybody gets involved in that, I think it'll just clear up a lot of these issues that we all have, depending on one person or one entity to solve our problems, when really there's a passion inside everyone. Now, when you talk about business owners, some of these business owners are passionate about something. It might not be what me or you are passionate about, but boy, do I want him behind that problem because he's passionate about it. That passion is going to make a difference in getting that done. The fact that he believes in it and he's passionate about it. So those business owners, they can connect with Jazz for Peace through your podcast and write us an email, and they can get started. There's an entrepreneurial website. I don't know if you ever heard of this one, but it's very cool since you work with entrepreneurs. It's called the Enterprise Zone. Enterprise Zone, and it's not enterprisezone.com or .org. It's enterprisezone.cc. Okay, that's their website. What they do is they call up entrepreneurs and they ask them questions, and they say, we have a question for you. Would you be willing to answer it in 100 words? If you do, we'll publish it. And they're 100-word answers. So in other words, you can get somebody's answer without reading the whole article, without watching 48 minutes of this or that, just to get that one answer. And they have nailed me with the most amazing questions, like, what kind of outstanding cause are you the most passionate about? And even I didn't know. I had to think of it. And I was like, you know what? The ones that follow simple guidelines. Those are my favorite. Because if you're going to clean the Hudson River over here, I think it's a great idea. But if you can't follow the simple guidelines for us to make the success, for us to really do our best for you, then I'd rather have the guy who wants to spade and neuter some kittens over here.
Right, absolutely.
Even though I might like your idea better, because I may not be as fond of cats as I am the Hudson.
Right, absolutely. But that passion is going to keep us driving forward when we hit obstacles or roadblocks. It's going to propel us through and actually have larger impact versus something that we're not passionate about. We're just not going to see it through. We don't have that motivation.
And the passionate person is hopefully going to go to the Enterprise Zone, see that article, only in 100 words, and say, wow, Jazz for Peace likes people who follow easy guidelines. So I don't have to give them a big spiel, and I don't have to sell them my idea. I just have to show them that I believe in something that's going to make our world better, and I'm willing to follow the guidelines. That's all I have to do. So if he's passionate about it, hey, you're our favorite if you're willing to follow the same easy guidelines as Special Olympics did in Boise, Idaho, or so-and-so or such and such. These indigenous people over in the Mara of Africa and the Great Migration, they follow the simple guidelines.
Absolutely. And speaking of passion, your passion is the music, the creativity, the Jazz for Peace. And you actually have a piece you've prepared for us to share with our audience today. And if you don't mind sharing that, we would love to hear that.
Yeah, because honestly, I tell you right now, I definitely would be nowhere without the jazz. I was inventing a lot of this on the fly, getting my answers from the actual people I was helping who were giving me the answers of how it worked for them. But it was the jazz that got me there in the first place. So what I'm going to try to do is take us from summer to fall, because that's where we are right now. The other day, I played my very first version this year of the classic song Autumn Leaves, but we're still, I don't know when this will come out. So what Jazz for Peace does with Outstanding Cause, actually, we try to take them from where they are now to where they need to be. They need to be more sponsored. They need to be more befriended. They need to be more prestigious. All these things in our empowerment tree, more funded. And so all of these things, there's 7 of them actually. And that's where we're trying to take for where they are not. So where we are now is where I'm going to start at summertime. Then I'm going to go into a kind of a free improvisation. Hopefully I'll end up from where we're about to be in the coming days or weeks, and that is in autumn.
I love it. Thank you so much. Very excited.
All right, let me see. I finally remember to click on this. Okay, let's see how we do. Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy's rich and your mama's good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you're gonna rise up singing, and you'll spread your wings and you'll take to the sky. But till that morning, there ain't nothing gonna harm C'est une chanson qui nous ressemble. Toi, tu m'aimais et je t'aimais. Nous vivions tous les deux ensemble. Toi qui m'aimais, moi qui t'aimais. Since you went away, the days grew long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves start to fall,
Rick, that was incredible. I love that.
Thank you so much, Chris. I do something unique every show. Like this is the first time, like it's been over 200 podcasts. This is the first time you'll ever see this medley. Maybe I'll try to emulate that with music.
That is beautiful. As I was listening, I was like, where can I listen to this all the time? Is this available online?
Well, like I said, for this medley that I just played, they have to come to your podcast. That's the only way to hear this medley. Someone is trying to talk to me about doing something called the Podcast Chronicles or something, which is just a compilation of 7 or 8 of them. Just choose 7 or 8 different music and put them so that someone could hear one after another. I'm guessing if you went to YouTube and you maybe look where like there's a mix or something, you might be able to hear them over and over again. It's funny you would say that because people are saying the same thing you're saying. They're saying, I've heard this one, I heard that. Is there anywhere I could hear them over one after another? So it's in the works. There's a guy talking to me about it, and he actually wants to work with me.
That is so cool. And I absolutely appreciate just the musicianship that went behind it. For those who are either versus listening versus watching throughout the piece here, if you notice, his sheet music actually fell off while he was improvising. He went into a one-handed, totally stylized it, brought the sheet music back up, back to two-handed, back to one hand, back to two-hand, and it just absolutely flowed seamlessly. But this is the years and decades of experience of just musicianship. This is what happens when you freestyle. You never know what can happen, and you just run with it, and you make it work. And it sounded absolutely flawless throughout.
I'm glad it did because I had no choice. One thing I would say to entrepreneurs is that you learn from being a musician, because in jazz, you go to a lot of jam sessions, or you play in a lot of jam sessions, or you play in weird situations where you never met the people before and you're going to make music and stuff like that. And the only way to address it is to actually be calmer than you were. So wherever you were at, you want to actually go to a calmer place to address that. So hopefully I naturally became calmer rather than the other way around when that happened. And I just went into a super calm and just allowed whatever was going to make it through. But I'm glad it worked out.
It was perfect, as opposed to just freaking out. You're like, oh no, where did it go? And now you're like, I have no sheet music. What do I do? Just play the scales, keep going. You absolutely handled it perfectly. I loved it.
I'm so glad. All I really did was go into a calm space calmer than I was, which was already relatively calm, but I went into a really calm space and just managed it from that space of calmness.
I really appreciate seeing live music happen, and I'll watch replays where maybe a drummer loses his stick and it's a sudden quick shift to it. Guitarist maybe loses their pick or a string breaks, and now they're playing the notes on a different string than they would, and they're just kind of making do with the situation that is brought in front of them. And I think that could be a lesson for many business owners and just people in this world, that you're going to encounter these obstacles, things that would just absolutely completely stop you dead in your tracks, but you need to keep going. There's ways to improvise and overcome and do it so flawlessly that it makes it seem like it was planned.
It's so interesting. I'm glad you're bringing that up because it's happened so many times. I remember one time I had a trio gig and I don't know what happened to this bass player. His drummer's there. Where's the bass player? Where is this guy? I don't know if he got the dates. I don't know what happened to this guy. And we played as if we just planned, the two of us, and a really good musician who a good friend of mine who I respect this day, he comes in the club and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's seeing me try to, blah, blah, blah. And he's with the owner in the back, and I go to the back and he introduced, and he's like telling me how much he dug it, as if he had no idea. And I wanted to tell him, I'm so sorry that the guy, I don't know what happened to this freaking bit. But he really wouldn't even let me. He thought it was so amazing. I was like, I'm just going to let him. He enjoyed it so much, I'm not going to spoil it by telling him that it was not supposed to be the way at all.
Yes, oftentimes us as musicians, we notice when we mess up or could have done better, or maybe something was missing or not done correctly. But the audience, we need to remember what the audience hears is that end result, and that's their perception. They don't see the missed notes or where they mistimed something. And that's something that we should be mindful of, not to be so hard on ourselves, because the audience is listening and they're just enjoying it. They enjoy what you have to say. These small mistakes that we may make, don't make them a bigger deal, because oftentimes no one else is giving a second thought to it.
Well, not only that, but without that player missing, with the bass player missing, there's actually things you can do with the drummer, just with the drummer, that you couldn't do without the bass player. So that's the time you would want to gravitate towards that thing to your advantage.
I love it. That is beautiful. Rick, we only have a little bit more time. I wanted to ask where people can find you online and get connected with you.
Definitely. Well, one way is that enterprisezone.cc. Read a couple of those things. The very first one, because the latest one that I've been published, unless they ask me another question in between now and then, but the latest one is that one. What kind of organization would you really want to put your everything behind? And I just answered it. It's only 100 words, but you read a couple other ones because they're great questions. And then all of those little things have our email address, and people who watch the show will have it. It's info@jazzforpeace.org, just the generic info at jazzforpeace.org, info@jazzforpeace.org. Our empowerment tree, just like a seedling, it starts with a comment. So when someone sends me a comment, that could be just a seedling that hits the ground, no biggie. It could be an empowerment tree that grows just from that comment.
That is fantastic. Rick, is there any last imparting wisdom you want to share with our audience here? Maybe something you wished you had learned sooner or realized sooner, or something that we can just take with us that'll maybe give us a better outlook on life?
The one in my mind right now was given to me from a podcast guest on the Jazz for Peace podcast. This guy came on and he told this story. And now the story goes back like 2,000 years or something. It's an ancient goes from back to the time or whatever in ancient China. And it's a story called The Man and His Horse. Now there's this guy, and he's got a horse, the horse runs off or whatever without him. The neighbor comes by, and the neighbor's like, Jesus, I'm so sorry about your horse. I know it was so important to you. And the guy says to the neighbor, who knows what is bad or what is good? He says to the guy, and the guy looks at him like, okay, this guy just lost his horse, which he needs. But if he wants to think that, that's fine with me. Next day, the horse comes back with a whole bunch of other horses. The horse had found some other horses and brings them all back to the farm. The guy comes back again. I can't believe what a result you got from losing your horse. Look at it. And the guy said, who knows what is good and what is bad? I will tell you. And the guy looks at him strange, walks away again. A few days later, his son, who he needs on the farm, like his, the big, strong manual labor on the farm, breaks his leg, falls off the horse and breaks his leg, I think, right? So now he's got this really bad broken leg. Now he's real messed up. Neighbor comes over again. I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry about your son. The guy, again, who knows what is good and what is bad, you know? And the guy looks at him like this. I'm like, this guy's Looney Tunes. And he goes, whatever. A few days later, the government comes, or the army, and they come looking for young people to take to war. And they look at him. I'm sorry, but we can't use your son. His leg is broke, can't even walk. Cannot go to the army. Turns out all the kids in that village died in that war, except him with the broken leg, the bad news broken leg. Turns out to be the best news ever. So if I was going to tell you one thing, it would be that who knows what is good or bad. Something happens to you, might seem so bad. Even the community might be mourning you, could be the greatest news in the long run. Jazz for Peace took something from the most horrific day and turned it into something that now everybody could play a part in if they got the message from your podcast and did so. Who knows what is good or what is bad? That's would be my parting words.
Rick, you're incredible. I appreciate you sharing that with us. We will also have the links available down in the description and the show notes so people can get connected with you and find you online. Rick, we appreciate you. Congratulations on all your success, all that you're doing in this world. And we look forward to seeing the many success that you have in the future.
My pleasure, Chris. Anytime.